Hello and welcome to your channel AWS Cloud Bytes. I'm your host Bhavesh Kumar. Today we will deep dive into the less obvious costs of cloud computing. We are here to reveal where your money might be leaking out and how to plug those leaks while still innovating. Here is our roadmap for today's journey. We are going to talk about pricing models of various cloud providers. We are going to look into the hidden cost drivers and we are going to talk about some best practices tools for cost optimization. Cloud is not free. Let's talk about some pricing of AWS, GCP, and Azure cloud provider. While these cloud providers often promote the flexibility of the pay as you go model, each pricing structure has its own nuances. Let's look at the AWS side of it. For instance, in on demand instances, they offer flexibility. In reserved instances, they provide you deeper discount, but you need to have some kind of usage that is predictable. And in spot instances, they offer a huge discount or dramatic saving, I would say, if you can handle occasional interruptions. If you look at GCP in Azure, they also provide similar kind of offerings. Like on-demand instances here, you have on-demand pricing, pay as you go over here, and these are all either no upfront, full upfront, or like a partial upfront. And then you have reserved instances with some lock-in period, 1 to 3 years, 1 or 3 years, sorry. Similarly over here, and then you have reserved VM instances here. In the interruptible spot instances, which means you can have 90% or more saving. I don't know about GCP percentages and Azure percentages, but these are deep discounts. If your application or if your jobs can work with interruptions, this is a good saving. Different pricing models offer attractive savings, but each come with a unique trade-off. If you look at the logged in pricing, it gives you steady usage. If you look at the spot or preemptible options, it gives you lower cost, but your application should be able to handle interruptions. These are packaged in a way that, depending upon your requirement, you need to choose wisely because if you're choosing reserved instances and they are not used, so you're going to burn money without having a proper use of that reserved instance or instances. Let's look into other services. So that's why this slide is called Beyond VMs, because the first one was more focused on virtual machines. This one is talking about other categories. It is not covering everything, but it's a bird's eye view for various pricing model across cloud services. And it is not just the virtual machines that we're talking here. So there are multiple ways you can choose. Like if you go by a serverless function, AWS Lambda is built by invocation, number of invocations, and then duration is added. So based on the number of invocations and durations you have built, Cloud Functions does the similar thing, and Azure Functions is also doing similar kind of pricing. Then you have container services like AWS has Fargate, where you define by vCPUs and the memory usage. These are serverless containers. You have GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, or Azure Container Instances here. Similarly, you have managed databases. So the pricing of choosing a managed database depends upon the instance type, storage, IOPS that you are looking for. You have Cloud SQL in GCP, you have Azure SQL Table in Azure, and then you have tiered pricing optimized for compute and storage needs. Kind of similar pricing for various kinds of services. These are container, serverless, managed databases, and then you have storage services, which is basically S3 over here for object storage. Then you have cloud storage, which is again tiered near line, cold line, very similar to you have various kind of storage options over here, like you have Glacier, and then you have standard storage, you have one zone, all that in AWS. Similarly, in Azure, you have similar kind of flexibility. Networking and data transfer, so data egress, which is going from your VPC to the internet, and then inter-region transfer fees are charged. Then you have API calls that are charged. Similar fees are in GCP and Azure. The bottom line here is each model comes with its trade-off, and then the flexibility versus cost, predictability, or risk versus reward. So you have to choose between these kind of trade-offs. Understanding these models is crucial for tailoring your cloud strategy to match your workload pattern and business requirements. Let's look at the idle cost. We'll talk about the common pitfalls and then the tools and strategies followed by the best practices. Have you ever paid for a server that barely moves, which means you are over provisioning? Over provisioning is one of the most common pitfall. Resources left idle or underutilized or unutilized can increase your cost without any business benefit. AWS provides tools like Compute Optimizer for sizing recommendations. Then you have Trusted Advisor to spot the idle or underutilized resources. You also have auto scaling capabilities, which means you don't have to over provision. You can scale as and when the requests are increased or whenever there is a requirement to scale. Then you also have the Cost Explorer in CloudWatch monitoring, which allows you to look at the usage and set the alarms. Regular reviews and scheduled shutdowns further help in aligning cost with actual usage, making your AWS environment both efficient and cost effective. What you can do is you can shut down your non-prod workload, or you can say anything that is dev, QA, all those kind of instances, EC2 instances. You can shut these down over the weekend, and you have various tools and operational capabilities available in AWS, as well as other cloud providers will also be providing such kind of tools and capabilities. So these custom tools, if required to build, these scripts, if required to build, can shut down your EC2 instances, can shut down your databases, and you can save money over the weekend or whenever there is non-business hours for all the non-prod test environments. For production, if you need 24 by 7, you can keep it up and running. But in case it is not required, you can still scale down or you can shut down if it is not a issue in your production environment. Let's look into the network and data transfer, another hidden cost. So there are factors and there are takeaways. Some of the factors that contributes to your network transfer, which is generally ignored by engineering team, is the inter-region data transfers because these are not very visible. If you have data transfer happening and you are unaware of it, you can actually get surprised by the bill if you haven't set up a alarm or a budget to get your notification before it happens based on the forecasting. The egress fees, which is basically data transfer happening from or a request happening from within the VPC using a NAT gateway or a NAT instance, that is an egress fee. And you can actually, if you are suppose calling to S3 or DynamoDB or any other service, and you're going through the VPC NAT gateway, you will end up having a lot of charges. I have seen that happen to one of my client, and because it was not using a VPC endpoint to talk to these services, it was going through the internet, and all this traffic was going through the net gateway to the internet and then to the AWS services. So that could have been saved, but that was identified late by the team, and we ended up paying a little bit more before implementing the solutions required to remove that egress fees. Similarly, you can have API call charges. The takeaway is data doesn't always stay put. So transferring data across regions and various services often incur fees that are not easy to identify or keep a track on if you don't have a good notification and budgeting in place or forecasting budgets in place that can give you a trend. Every small data transfer can accumulate significant cost. There was another example where a lot of log have been pushed to AWS CloudWatch. The CloudWatch was called for generating a lot of metrics. So we were looking into a client's requirement where the CloudWatch log itself, log and API calls itself for like $700 to $1,000 a month. And we found out there was a lot of log which was not required for non-prod and prod both. And these logs were sitting there for indefinitely with the expiration of indefinite. So one of the things that you can perform is such logs should have a definite expiration time, as well as the amount of log that we put in CloudWatch or any kind of logging infrastructure in all three cloud providers provided log should be adequate, not too much. And then the duration when it is defined, it is not going to be charged. So you are getting charged for storage, as well as if you are pulling out these metrics and pushing it to various dashboards and live dashboards, those API call like get metric data API calls in CloudWatch was significantly high. So we ended up cleaning those metrics that were not required to be reported at a higher frequency, reducing that cost. Let's look into the monitoring and mitigating network cost. Some of the monitoring tools, you can see the cost dashboard, AWS Cost Explorer, you have GCP billing reports, real-time tracking with VPC flow logs and CloudWatch, API usage analysis. Now, for mitigating these expenses, consider strategies like optimizing your application architecture to minimize cross-region transfers. Use CDN or content delivery networks to cache and serve static data closer to the user. And compressing data before transfer will also help in reducing this cost because this will be less data transferred. Also, reevaluate API call patterns and consider consolidating calls when possible. Software and licensing expense in the cloud. We're going to look into bundled software cost, container orchestration cost or licensing cost, then managed service fees, and subscription versus pay per use. License and service fees are another layer of costs. Software licensing in the cloud can be hidden cost trap. So many cloud providers, they bundle third-party software, which includes OS licenses, enterprise apps, middlewares. These costs can be added, and over a period of time, you will not know how this cost will exponentially grow, and then you will have unexpected cost due to these licensing fees. Managed container service and databases might offer great convenience, which means you don't have to do anything around managing these services. They are just a solution that is provided, and the scaling and all other aspect of these databases and services are taken care of. These are great convenience, but they sometimes carry additional licensing fees. So suppose if I want to use a Windows VM, I will end up having a licensing cost of Windows in that. Or if I use a SQL Server, there will be a SQL Server cost, licensing cost associated with that. You have to be careful about what kind of subscription or pay-per-use models you're using. You can pinpoint these extra charges early so that you ensure that your cloud investment truly aligns with your budget and operational needs. So this picture is just depicting that you have extra licensing fees because of the OS or enterprise applications, and then you have services like EKS, GKE, AKS. All these have hidden features. Like these fees are charged based on the premium features that you're going to use. Security and compliance, cost of protection. Security and compliance are non-negotiable, but they can add significant costs. To mitigate these expenses, leverage the native security tools provided by your cloud provider. They're often bundled with your service. You should automate your compliance, audits, and reporting to reduce the manual overhead. And right size your security services based on the actual risk. Finally, consolidating solutions across vendors can help reduce or avoid the redundant expenses. These strategies not only protect your data, but also keep your budget in check. Key security costs are around services such as advanced encryption and secure data storage, threat detection and monitoring services. And then you have a lot of, depending upon which industry you are in, if you are in health industry, HIPAA and those kind of compliance audits and certifications are also a requirement a legal requirement that you have to adhere to. Requires some kind of cost around that. The cost of scaling, vertical versus horizontal. Scaling decisions directly affect your bottom line. Vertical scaling offer an immediate boost by upgrading to more powerful instances, but it comes up to a premium price and there are inherent hardware limitations. On the other hand, you have horizontal scaling. They distribute the workload across multiple instances, which can be more cost effective over time, but introduces additional cost like orchestration, load balancing, network overhead. The key trade off between vertical and horizontal is balancing the performance improvements with cost efficiency. So choosing the right strategy means aligning scaling with your actual workload demand and long-term business growth. This slide helps you understand that each approach has its own financial implications. Making informed decisions is critical to maintain cost-effective operations. The summarization of this slide is you need to look into performance versus cost. The second comparison is how complex you want. The complexity grows with horizontal scaling because you need to have these orchestration things. And then you have to choose what strategy work for you given the demand and the supply that you're looking for. So it's more of a demand alignment. Cost effective monitoring and management. So monitoring is necessary. How do I know things are going good or things are really bad? First of all, implementation of monitoring itself is it's a task. It's a big task. Right monitoring is important. If you have monitoring and that is excessive monitoring you're performing, it's going to be expensive. So monitoring, logging everything, like I gave an example about CloudWatch logging everything, is going to bump up your cost quickly. If you have a lot of over provisioned tools, like you're monitoring your API calls, you're monitoring your health statuses at a very high frequency, like every couple of minutes you're looking the API is up and running, and you're just not looking at the statuses or the pings. You're having heavyweight calls just to say, oh, my database is up and running. All those sort of monitoring, if you're having those tools, it will add up to the cost. Do you actually need that much? So there is a requirement to understand your monitoring needs. You need to track only the key metrics that matters. Your business needs to run. So what makes sense to be monitored so that your business is not impacted, all those P1s and P2s, depending upon your RTOs, recovery time and objective, point and objective, are those RTOs and RPOs measured in your monitoring is running so that you can have some kind of alerts before things go bad. Excessive logging will inflate your storage, and then similarly over provision tools is a lot of expense around the tools. Over alerting is like it's gonna add noise and people will start paying lesser and lesser attention. It is not only going to add noise, it is also going to cost you. The tips around this are you need to track key metrics. You need to have smart alerts, not just smart, actionable alerts. You can use tiered storage and then use built-in tools like CloudWatch. GCP has its Operations Suite and Azure Monitor. Okay, let's summarize the best practices to avoid unnecessary expenses. You should do regular audit around your cloud spending, and you should identify unused or oversized resources. Right sizing and optimizing, leverage cost saving models, reduce unnecessary data transfer, look into monitoring, and you should adjust your monitoring continuously. Leverage native tools such as AWS Cost Explorer, GCP Cost Management, Azure Cost Analysis. The key takeaway from this presentation is that cloud cost optimization isn't a one-time effort. It requires regular audits, strategic resource allocation, and a mix of cost-saving strategies. This is the end of the episode. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please like, share, subscribe, and press the notification bell icon for future updates. This is your host Bhavish Kumar signing off. Thank you.